Well, good afternoon, everyone. And officially, we welcome you to Notre Dame, Ohio State week. We have finally arrived. I guess the appetizers are over. Now we get to one of, three main courses, if not a few more, coming up for the Fighting Irish. This is Hey Horka live on this Monday, following Notre Dame taking care of Central Michigan 41-17. My name is Darin Pritchett from Sports Radio 960, WSBT in South Bend. I'll be hosting my radio show from 5 to 7 tonight at WSBTradio.com, and Tyler will be a guest on that particular program. And he is Tyler Horka, the Notre Dame football beat reporter at Blue and Gold Illustrated, blueandgold.com. Well, we've been waiting this for a long, long time. We were hoping the Irish would be undefeated. I think it's nice that Ohio State is undefeated going into this game, setting up a top 10 matchup.
Yeah, for sure. You definitely want Ohio State to be undefeated, because if they would have lost to Indiana, Youngstown State, or Western Kentucky, it would have definitely taken some of the flair out of this matchup. So it's kind of that double-edged sword. If you're a Notre Dame fan, you don't want Ohio State to be playing really well going into this, because you want Notre Dame to win. But the fact of the matter is Ohio State just played its best game of the season against Western Kentucky. And I mean, Western Kentucky's probably the second best opponent among the three that Ohio State has faced. I mean, they're probably better than Youngstown State. Maybe even they're better than Indiana. I don't know. Indiana's not that good of a football team. Anyone that lives around the South Bend area or across the state of Indiana probably knows that. So, yeah, it is what it is. College game day is coming to town. As soon as the clock hit triple digits, triple zeros on Central Michigan, I was down on the field, because that's what the print reporters do, to try to get to the press conference as soon as we can, go up the same tunnel that Notre Dame runs out every Saturday. And you could just kind of feel it. Like for instance, this doesn't happen all the time, where the in-stadium host, the MC, whatever you want to call her, brings Sam Hartman over, interviews him on the field, and says, "What is your message to Notre Dame Nation before the Fighting Irish, you guys take on Ohio State?" And he just said, "I want you guys to get here. I want you to be early, and I want you to be rowdy." So you don't get that after every game, especially after we'll talk about it a little bit, obviously, a little bit of a snoozer against Central Michigan. I mean, I tweeted out that the guys were sleepwalking a little bit, maybe looking ahead. I can't put myself into their shoes or into their helmets, but it definitely, Darin, it felt like maybe they were looking ahead, but in the end, they still win 41-17. You saw enough good things. And I think people around here in South Bend are probably pretty excited about this game, just the way Notre Dame's playing right now.
Before we get into more on Central Michigan and Ohio State, let's just point this out. And I think people who subscribe to Blue and Gold Illustrated know this based on Mike Singer's, of course, great coverage of all things recruiting. The Deuce Knight picked the Fighting Irish last night, the 2025 quarterback. He had a live show today on it. So if you want to read more about Deuce Knight, of course, you can get the coverage at blueandgold.com. We're going to stick to regular football conversation. And I think a good place to start is for all Irish fans coming to South Bend, in particular those that might be making their first trip to South Bend. The first thing you got to do, maybe after you go to your hotel room, that is, Tyler, you have to go to Augie's to see the great, great Notre Dame memorabilia that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've been watching this show religiously, which I think we've got a few people on here who have probably tuned into all of these, you've heard us tout Augie's Locker Room. We're going to continue to do that. It's a hop, skip, and a jump away from Notre Dame's campus, and there's going to be a lot of people on that Notre Dame campus this week. So when you do come for this game, and then Notre Dame, as Sam Hartman pointed out today, Notre Dame's got 3 more home games after this as well. So you've got plenty of opportunities to make time for Augie's Locker Room. They have a wide selection of Notre Dame stadium pieces, jerseys, helmets, autographs, and one-of-a-kind Rock Me items. You can find exclusive Joe Montana signed items and famous sculptor Jerry McKenna's replicas of the bronze statues around the stadium. Augie gets new items all the time. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see some of the stuff he's got in there. I mean, it's fantastic. It's like a Notre Dame history museum in there. And if he doesn't have it in there, then he will find it for you. So visit Augie at 1811 South Bend Avenue. Again, I mean, you can if you're a runner, you can get to Notre Dame's campus in less than a minute. If you'd rather walk, it's probably 3 minutes. So yeah, go there, 1811 South Bend Avenue. And then if you want to call him, that's 574-277-6363. And the website that we're showing our YouTube watchers right now is augieslockerroom.com. Heck of a place. I imagine it's going to be popping this weekend, Darin, because like we said, this is kind of it. This is the premier matchup on Notre Dame's schedule. I know the Heisman Trophy winner and Caleb Williams is coming to South Bend less than 2 months from now. But Ohio State hasn't been here since 1996, and it's only the third time ever. So this one just feels different, and I think Augie's Locker Room is going to be a popular place this week.
All right, folks, let's remind you, please subscribe to the Blue and Gold YouTube channel. We'd love for you to like this particular presentation here. Hey, Horka on the Blue and Gold YouTube channel. And we've got questions from Irish fans lined up and ready to go, plus some other conversations along the way. So, Tyler, if you're ready to go, we'll go to our first question. And it comes from 4340. And they want to know, what are the top 3 things that need to occur for Notre Dame to beat the Ohio State University?
Yeah, and I'm kind of taking a page from your playbook here, Darin. I like what we do on our pregame show on Saturdays. I'm going to say a thing, and then you say it. So I'll start with my third thing. And when I was answering this question for our online subscribers, I was like, yeah, I can come up with 3 things easy. And that was the case. I came up with 3 things, and then I was like, wait, this is a thing. This is another thing. So there's probably like 5 to 7, maybe even 10 things that Notre Dame needs to do well, or whatever. You know, the keys to the game doesn't necessarily mean something Notre Dame has to do well. Maybe it's something they need to prevent, or maybe it's something just has to happen for Notre Dame to win. I'm going to start with number 3, red zone defense. I think Notre Dame struggled with it last year. We still don't really know what kind of team Notre Dame is in the red zone this year, just because they've played a bunch of opponents that haven't really gotten down there. I mean, NC State still didn't even get down there much. And then when they did, NC State punched in some touchdowns, and that's why you saw 24 points on the board for the Wolfpack at the end of that. I think just this past weekend, Central Michigan went down into the red zone there late in the first half, punched in a touchdown, made it a 1-touchdown game at halftime. So you're going against an Ohio State offense that knows how to put the ball in the end zone, especially once you get into that red area. So 63 points last week for Ohio State. They're not going to score 63 points against Notre Dame, but the more times that they get into that red zone, the better opportunity they have to put up a big number. So it's going to be on the Notre Dame defense to try to prevent that from happening.
Before I get to my third choice, I didn't go with some of the obvious ones. Win the turnover game, fewer penalties, although that's important for Notre Dame to cut down on some of those penalties that are really self-inflicted. So beyond those obvious choices, my number 3 was control the Ohio State run game. I highly doubt you're going to stop it, but if you can control that run game and put more on the shoulders of Kyle McCord, the quarterback for Ohio State, I think that's okay from a Notre Dame perspective, even though they've got outstanding wide receivers that scare you. But if they get the run game going, then you've got the double whammy going, and that's when things get awfully scary for Al Golden. I know they have several guys that they use, but Travion Henderson to me is the one guy in the running game that is scary. 191 yards and 4 touchdowns so far this year. Now they ran for 200 against Western Kentucky on Saturday, but statistically, Western Kentucky is atrocious in stopping the run. So it shouldn't be a surprise Ohio State's run game looked better in that game than it had the first couple of ball games. So you're not going to stop that running game, at least I don't think so. But I at least want them to keep it under control so they don't have the opportunity to be balanced. Put a little more on the shoulders of McCord, who's making his first career start on the road.
Yeah, that's a good one. Kind of mad that I didn't go with this one. Let's see if I can zoom this in for our YouTube watchers. Here's the running game that you're talking about, Darin. Travion Henderson, obviously at the top there with his 191 yards rushing. Kind of the wild card, the X factor to me, and I wrote this. Here's a good opportunity for me to plug the written version of what we do, the print copy. By the way, if you're watching this, obviously you can see this, but if you're listening to the podcast version, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, go to my Twitter account, X account, whatever you want to call it, scroll through my media and find our most recent blueandgold.com cover. I guess I'll take off Ohio State's rushing attack right now just so everyone can see it a little larger. I think I've been a part of probably like 50 of these, maybe even more. I don't know, whatever 2.5 years worth is. That's one of the coolest covers that we've done, Darin, with Audric Estime literally hurtling over a defender.
Yep. I want to correct myself. Thanks to GOJ, it's his second start. He started at Indiana on the road, so my mistake.
Gotcha. And so the X factor that I was talking to everybody about is Diamante Trayanum. I don't know if I said that right. He was at Arizona State, I believe, for the first few years of his career. Last year, he might have already exceeded the amount of offensive. Definitely, I think he only played like 20-something offensive snaps last year for Ohio State. He's got 19 carries for 133 yards, averaging 7 yards per carry. Obviously, Audric Estime, who I just showed everybody with our blue and gold covers, got something to say about yards per carry because his average is ridiculous this season. But to your point, Darin, a healthy stable of backs for Ohio State. We think about the Ohio State wide receivers, the quarterbacks that they've had, but Marcus Freeman said it today in his press conference as well. When you think Ohio State, you think everything starts with the run. So I do think stopping the run is going to be huge. I'll get to my number 2 now. For Notre Dame, it's staying clean offensively. And what I mean is don't turn the ball over. Sam Hartman has 0 interceptions in his first 4 games. I think he's only lost that 1 fumble against NC State. Didn't amount to any points. When you turn the ball over against a team like Ohio State with the running game that you just mentioned, Darin, and then the wide receivers, Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Ibuka, Kyle McCord just played his best game that he's played all season. That's the type of team that takes advantage. And when you're a road team, you're looking for those turnovers and say, hey, if we can cash in on these, we got a better chance of knocking off Notre Dame at home. So for Notre Dame, obviously, if you want a better chance of winning at home, it's take care of the football. You don't have to score on every possession like you did against Navy and Tennessee State. You're going to go 3 and out sometimes. You're going to punt the football sometimes. Both of those scenarios are better than interception, fumble, pick 6 even. So number 2 for me, take care of the football.
Okay, my number 2 is make Kyle McCord very, very uncomfortable. And this gets back to the Irish fan base debate. Can this football team not only get pressure on the quarterback, but bring down the quarterback? Now, Marcus Freeman pushed back against all the focus being on sacks, and I get where he's coming from. He mentioned that this is the number 1 pass efficiency defense in the country. Part of that is the ability, putting some pressure on the quarterback as well as coverage down the field. But if McCord has all day, Harrison, Egbuka, they can have massive days. Even how good the Irish corners have been and can be in this particular ball game. But if you get McCord off his platform, you get him moving a little bit, you break up the timing of those routes, that's when mistakes starts to happen. And that's when maybe you see the interceptions that occurred like at North Carolina State. So whether it's the front 4, maybe surprising us getting pressure all by themselves, or if it's Al Golden dialing up pressures, and Marcus Freeman mentioned that they brought 6 once and no one got close to the quarterback. If you do that against Ohio State, you better hold your breath. And let me just cheat a little bit and add in one more element to my thought. Once McCord throws the football or once Travion Williams runs it, this team's got to tackle better.
Yeah, the tackling was not great against Central Michigan. And I don't know if that was looking ahead to Ohio State or whatever it was. It just wasn't very good. And Marcus Freeman, every time that we've spoken to him since then, he said that it has to be better. So they know that. And for my number 1, I'm also going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to combine 2 things. But it's 2 things that generally tend to happen on the same plays. So it's a combination of effectiveness from the Notre Dame pass rush, which is exactly what you were just saying. And then the Irish's secondary holding up in coverage when Notre Dame does decide to blitz, because it's probably a perfect time, Darin, to bring up that double safety blitz. And I know that was Notre Dame, Al Golden selling out to say, hey, we're either going to tackle this guy in the backfield or they're probably going to score a touchdown. Unfortunately for Notre Dame, it was the latter. But there are going to be instances, and I think we've seen it more this year, where Notre Dame sends 6, leaves 5 back in coverage, which is not what they did that one time. They blitzed both safeties. You're going to see the safety sit back. You're going to see the cornerback sit back. You're going to have a nickel on the field most of the time. So, and maybe one of those defensive backs does rush. But when you've got 4 or 5 guys back, and maybe the pass rush is effective in a sense that it flushes Kyle McCord out. But this is finally a team that Notre Dame is playing where you flush out a quarterback, plays can still be made by the Notre Dame or by the Ohio State offense because they're just that talented and that good. So once you play, those are the most frustrating plays to me in football, Darin, is when you do get a quarterback out on the run. And guess what? CJ Stroud did it multiple times last year. He showed off his NFL accuracy. They had him running dead to the sideline. No play should be made, but he finds a window, moves the chains. So you have to have that combination of, hey, the defensive line did its job. It's got this guy on the move. Then on the back end, the secondary has to come up with pass breakups, which were a huge issue. Notre Dame was one of the worst teams in FBS last year in terms of total passes broken up. So that's the combination for me. When you're playing a team like Ohio State that can do all of these different things offensively, you've got to be on your game in all these different areas defensively as well.
It seems like, Tyler, in most Ohio State big games, you have to outscore them. Now, Notre Dame, Ohio State last year, Notre Dame held them down as well as anybody in the country. But normally I always feel like sometimes you got to outscore Ohio State. Georgia, with their great defense, still had to outscore Ohio State in the national semifinal. So my number one key is, can the Notre Dame offensive line hold up against that front? And you've got 2 extremely talented linebackers in Steele Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg. If you don't get hats on those guys, they're going to cause a lot of havoc. We've focused a lot on the interior of the offensive line. How are they going to hold up game in and game out? Well, I wouldn't say this is your final exam, but this is a major, major test for this group. If you can't control that front, and 44 for Ohio State, he only has 7 tackles. He doesn't have a sack yet. I feel like he's a ticking time bomb ready to explode. But this defensive line can cause you a lot of headaches, really good instinctive linebackers. If the offensive line doesn't hold up, can you keep up scoring with Ohio State if they find a way to score against Al Golden's defense?
Yeah, and I just brought up this comment from Andrew Gilmore. Appreciate the comment, Andrew. He agrees with you. And maybe I'm wrong for putting 2 defensive things in my top 3, but I think defense can definitely help you win this football game. But to your point, Darin, 2 honorable mentions for me in this discussion were the offensive line holding up. And that just is what it is. It has to protect Sam Hartman. It has to generate a running game for Notre Dame, because I think Notre Dame is going to be at its best in this game when Audric Estime is helping the offense chug along and it's not pass from Sam Hartman. And then number 2, when it is Sam Hartman passing the football, these Notre Dame wide receivers have to get open against some very, very good defensive backs for Ohio State. I just actually wrote a story probably within an hour of us getting on here. And this is a premium story, so I will I'll share some of this, but not all of it here. Some secrets. There's the headline: what to expect from Notre Dame wide receivers versus elite secondary for Notre Dame wide receivers versus Ohio State's elite secondary. The Notre Dame passing offense, Darin, is better this year. How good is it is my question. We're going to find out when these wide receivers go against these very good defensive backs. Here's the starting 5, if you will, including a nickel corner for Ohio State. These are their rankings per the On3 industry ranking when they were recruits. Sonny Styles was the number 2 athlete in his class. Denzel Burke, number 7 athlete. Cameron Martinez, number 7 athlete. Josh Proctor, number 7 safety. Jordan Hancock, number 5 corner. These are the best of the best that high school football has to offer in terms of secondary talent. Notre Dame's wide receivers, who, like I said, they're better this year. How much better? We're going to find out against those guys, because those guys are very good.
And I'll just add this as we close up this topic. There was an interview before the season started, and I got to refine the article. I believe it was from an Ohio State publication, But wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. was asked about cornerbacks he faced. He said only one cornerback has been able to really contain him, and it wasn't on the Notre Dame roster. I don't know if you believe in bulletin board material. Maybe it's a little overrated, but if the Notre Dame coaches have a copy of that, I have a feeling that might show up in the cornerback room this week, because I know the Irish coaching staff have a ton of confidence in those four corners they run out onto the field. And that'll be a fun opportunity to see a Harrison against Hart, Harrison against Morrison, whatever the matchups end up being. That will be must-see TV.
For sure. And Benjamin Morrison has 7 interceptions in his career so far. He's got a 98-yard return versus Clemson. If he gets one against Ohio State, it's immediately number one on the highlight reel. You got a lot to choose from, but there's just something about a big takeaway in a game like this. We're going to be seeing, if Benjamin Morrison picks off a pass this week, we're going to be seeing that a lot more. Even when he's gone, even when he's off to the NFL, people are going to be replaying that.
Okay, let's move along to our next question from Nighthawk Indy Fan 69. Tyler, he wants to know, what position group has impressed you the most to start the season, and what position group has been the most disappointing or underachieving? So let's start with the position group that's impressed you the most.
Yeah, I'm going to cheat a little bit here and kind of combine two and just kind of lump it all in together. The secondary, I think, has been great. And you mentioned earlier, and Marcus Freeman has mentioned time and time again, this is the number one pass efficiency defense in college football. A lot of that has to do with the secondary. A lot of it has to do with a very high pressure rate that Notre Dame has this season as well. So the defensive line is doing some good things, but I think most of that pass efficiency defense statistic comes from intercepting Brennan Armstrong 3 times. Like most of those plays, albeit the one that went through the wide receiver's hands, I think DJ Brown ended up with that interception. Very good plays. Benjamin Morrison, awesome pick against NC State. Xavier Watts, great play to get a pick against NC State. So we knew kind of coming in, Darin, that was going to be a really good unit. The cornerbacks, especially for Notre Dame. But I think the safeties have played pretty darn well as well. And Thomas Harper's kind of a hybrid, nickel corner. When you see him in individual drills, for instance, you see him working out with the safeties, but you think he's a cornerback. So that just shows like the overall togetherness. And I think those guys have been really good. Andrew Gilmore says running backs. We'll let you answer this question now, Darin. You signing with Andrew Gilmore? Because I kind of gloss over my head, and we will have time for a running back discussion later in the show. There's a little teaser, but that's probably another good direction to go. Which way are you going, Darin?
Well, safety was at the top of my list, so you took care of that. So my second choice was running back. Even though it's not a massive surprise they're playing this well, I think there was just enough uncertainty from lack of experience to at least make you say, all right, let's see how this is going to play out. We knew Audric Estime was going to be the guy. He has, but you had Price coming off the Achilles. Question marks there. You got a young guy in Love. Ford came from Penn State. I think Jabron Payne was always the guy that the Notre Dame coaching staff felt comfortable putting out in many situations, including pass protection. But now that we've seen them, I think they have lived up to our hope. And this is kind of a side topic. There's no wrong answer to what I'm about to say. So what the coaches have done, it has worked extremely well. But I know, Tyler, you and I are more about just a couple of running backs playing more than the 5 we have seen. I actually like the way things worked out Saturday. Estime had 20, and then you had Price had 3, Love had 3, Ford had just a catch. So we saw the big guy get the most carries. I wouldn't have expected that to happen against Central Michigan, but with the way he was rolling in the second half, how can you take him off the field? I would expect the same thing on Saturday. Yeah,
and I guess in a way it was almost good that he got those 20 carries, because I think if you're Audric Estime, you're probably sitting there thinking, okay, that felt good. Let's do it again. Let's do it again against an even better opponent. That's also just the kind of guy he is. We're lucky enough to talk to him quite a few times. And I mean, that dude is so happy-go-lucky. If he would have gotten 9 carries in that game, he would have been like, yeah, that's just the way it shook out. But he got 20, made the most of them. And he's a competitive dude. Don't get me wrong. When I say happy-go-lucky, yeah, He's fun like that, but he's also a competitive dude. And I guarantee you, if he could run the ball 40 times in this game, he would. That's not a winning game plan for Notre Dame. I think 20 is probably another a reasonable number, and a number that he could do some damage with as well.
Okay, so
And
let's go to the
how
other
about we
part
look
of
at
the
this
question,
real
which
quick though,
is
Darin. This is when you know it's Ohio State week. We have an Ohio State fan who has infiltrated the YouTube. Bilal here says Notre Dame is not scoring more than 17 points, in my opinion. Hey, you know what they say about opinions? Everyone has one, and I'll leave it at that.
if he wants to give me plus 100 odds on that, I'll go ahead and take the over.
Yeah, I don't think FanDuel or wherever you do your sports betting is going to give you that.
And anyway, it looks like it's Ohio State +3, +3.5, depending on the outlet you go with. But it was -7 as of earlier last week. So
yeah,
a lot of sharp money has come in on the old Fighting Irish. So now the second part of that question, the most disappointing or underachieving position group. This was hard for me. I'm going to get your thoughts first.
Well, it should be hard when your football team is 4-0 and offensively, it's really tough to find one averaging 40, however many points per game it is now. And defensively, I think that's the way to go with this, though. And Marcus Freeman sat there at his press conference today and kind of pushed back at my colleague, Jack Sobel, when he asked about the sacks. Jack was not trying to frame it like, hey, where are the sacks? But I think Marcus might have took it that way. And he said, we're doing fine defensively. Like the defensive line is doing what it needs to. I totally agree with that. The pressures are nice and everything, but I still think the defensive line is my answer to this question because it just feels like, I don't know, Darin, if you have any thoughts on this before you give your answer, but it's like, it feels like the defensive line could do a little bit more to be toward that elite status. For example, I know it doesn't matter anymore because he's not here, but Jason Adamalola before the Ohio State game last year said, we're the biggest, baddest, fill in the blank with the word that I can't say on this show right now, and we're going to prove it. And yeah, Notre Dame held Ohio State to 21 points last year, but I don't think it felt like Notre Dame had the best defensive line in the country last year. And through 4 games this year, I don't even think I would put them in the conversation. They're good. There's some good players, but I don't watch a Notre Dame game this year and then watch back the game and watch the tape and say, yeah, man, this defensive line, this is like a championship level defensive line, right? The conversation with this team right now is all offense, and nobody's really sitting there thinking, yeah, this defensive line is going to shut down everybody. And it's probably why you stop the Ohio State running game as one of your keys to the game, right? Because this defensive line has to do that too. It's more than about getting sacks. It's going up against a very good rushing football team. And I guess I'm a little bit skeptical is the word that I would use right now. I'm not sure about the defensive line right now.
This is hard for me because during the spring, during the offseason, going into the first game, my biggest concern was the defensive line. And the way I felt about the defensive line, they're actually a little better than I anticipated. In particular, Onye is really coming on. Howard Cross has been fantastic. So based on where I thought they were, it's hard for me to say that's my underachieving group. But I like your thinking, though, from your standpoint. I had a hard time with this, and I really struggled for one area that's truly underachieving. The one thing I came up with, and this is really a stretch, Tyler, I don't think this is a great answer, to be perfectly honest, but based on how impactful almost every game special teams was last year, they've got a block this year. The punt return and kickoff return game have been okay. Punting's been good. Schrader's been a little hit and miss on some long field goals. So I'm not saying this is a negative at all, that they're underachieving, but based on all the excitement last year, it's been a little quieter in that area.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. My mind didn't really, Marcus Freeman talks about the drift. My mind didn't really drift in that direction, but that's why I like doing this show with you, man. We're coming at it from different angles. So I definitely agree with you there. You kind of want that 59-yarder to go in for Schrader, or at NC State, I think it was 56 yards. I haven't seen a return play for Notre Dame as like tantalizing and special since I've been covering this football team, since the Chris Tyree thing against Wisconsin, probably in 2021. Like last year, as great as the special teams was last year, getting all these blocks and touchdowns and whatnot, Was there a big return last year that I'm missing, Darin? But like, there's another one. If you're going to talk special teams, I don't think there was a big return last year, and we definitely haven't seen one this year.
Nothing off the top of my head, not saying that we're missing one, but yeah, nothing pops out right now. There were just a lot of blocks. That's the one thing from last year. Okay. Want to go to question 3?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Let's go with this. This is again from Nighthawk, Indy Fan 69. Besides Sam Hartman, who has been the player that's impressed you the most? Who has been the most underachieving? So let's start with the player that's impressed you the most.
Here's where we can highlight Audric Estime and his number 2 in the country rushing yards per game average. I believe he's at 130, and I forget who the guy in front of him plays for a smaller group of 5 team. I can look it up right here really quickly. Nate Noel of Appalachian State averages 151.3 yards per game right now. So here's the conversation on Audric Estime. It's not like a surprise that he's doing this, but I am a little like wide-eyed that it's been this good, and he's having plays that get called back, like the one against Central Michigan that I didn't know he had in him. Like, it didn't even count, but I was like, whoa. The breakaway speed that he showed against Central Michigan was almost as impressive as the touchdown that he had against NC State, because he had to get to the corner for this one. And then Holden stays, obviously, the holding call. Audric Estime kind of actually joked that we're not going to talk about that in the post-game press conference about the Holden stays holding call. But just to get to the edge, I know it's against Central Michigan, and then straight line speed it all the way down the sideline. I've been watching this guy for 3 years. Back-to-back weeks, he's shown me straight line speed. Like, holy cow, this guy's impressive in that way. And then in the fourth quarter, he hurdles over 2 different guys in a span of like 2 or 3 plays, whatever that was. The strength is still there. I mean, he's up to 233 pounds this year. Darin, I think it's actually time through 4 games to like have a legitimate conversation that he might be the best running back in college football. Like, he's on the short list, isn't he?
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
Yeah. So Audric Estime, outside of Sam Hartman, has been my individual player that's impressed me the most.
Okay, I'm going to go to the defensive side to give them a little love. And I got to go with 2 guys because I couldn't pick just one. I'll start with Howard Cross. That NC State game, he was everywhere. He has been highly consistent so far this year. He's 3rd on the team in tackles. And normally interior defensive linemen aren't that high up the charts in tackles. He's got 16 so far this year. So I'm really impressed with Howard Cross. And Maris Leofau has become the player many anticipated pre-broken ankle 2 August ago. Al Golden mentioned earlier this year, Maris wasn't all the way recovered from that broken ankle last year, and now this year he is fully recovered. His explosion is back, and he's got 17 tackles, 2nd on the team right now. So who are the guys that impressed me on the defensive side? I got to go with Cross and Leofau as my top 2.
Yeah, you asked us on Saturday, Darin, before the CMU game, who's been the most surprising 5 players actually we gave you, and I picked Maris Leofau as number 1. And there's some crossover there between surprising and impressive, because obviously he wouldn't be surprising to me if he hasn't been as overly impressive as he's been, and he has. So I think that is a fantastic answer, and there's probably a lot of Notre Dame fans who agree with you as well.
Unfortunately, a guy like Sam Hartman doesn't make this list because he was really good before this year. Right. And he's actually, I think, lived up to our expectations. So he goes, unfortunately, unnoticed because we expect him to do that. But it's hard not to at least mention his name. He has been absolutely everything you could have wanted in a transfer quarterback.
Absolutely. I watched all those Wake Forest games last year, and I was like, okay, this guy's really good. But it seems like he's even better this year. And again, I'm not like really surprised by that because I thought it was going to be good. But I mean, 13 touchdowns, no picks, number 4 passer rating in the country, number 6 QBR. I think he's top 5 in yards per attempt, which is a huge metric as well. I mean, that tells you how well you're throwing the ball yards per attempt. Caleb Williams has been leading it since like the beginning of last year. Caleb Williams, 12.5. Jackson Dart of Ole Miss is actually 12.5 as well. Then you have Dante Moore. I think people might recognize that name at UCLA, 12.1. Sam Hartman's tied with Michael Penix Jr. at 11.8 yards per attempt, which is a fantastic number.
Remember our show after Navy? We had someone ask, is Sam Hartman that great at throwing the deep ball? And we defended Sam based on your video work last year and based on what I had seen. We were not concerned at all. Go back and look at the two bombs in this game to Merriweather and Tyree. Neither one of those guys broke stride. That was an NFL Hall of Fame throw to Merriweather and Tyree. Now, granted, there was no safety help, so that makes it a little easier. But still, the fact those receivers deep down the field did not have to break stride, absolutely perfect tosses by good old number 10.
Yeah, just one quick thing on that. Tobias Merriweather literally said that's the difference between a college quarterback and an NFL quarterback. He called Sam Hartman an NFL quarterback because guys like Sam Hartman, NFL quarterbacks, I think his exact phrasing was, they give you no choice but to catch the ball. They put the ball in such a good spot that if you're not catching that ball, it's on you, man. And that was the case on those two throws. I know they were both wide open, but to your point, Darin, and I tweeted this too on the Chris Tyree one, and the same goes for the Tobias Merriweather one as well. You could not physically pick up the football, run 50 yards down the field, because that's how long the throw was to Tyree, and put the ball just like placed in a better spot in Tyree's hands. When you have a speedster like that, that's what you want, is for Tyree to make the catch with his arms out like that, like he did. Just beautiful. And I think you're going to see that a few more times this season. Maybe not against Ohio State, but if you do see it against Ohio State, oh boy, I think the world will be watching and the world will catch on to that.
I hate to say this knowing what NIL money he's probably making right now, but this is a money game for Sam Hartman. The NFL wants to see him in a pro-style offense. He's at Notre Dame, and now you got Ohio State as good a matchup defensively against Sam this year. This can be a big-time money game, let alone all the great things that can happen for this Notre Dame football team.
Absolutely.
Well, Tyler, I got to say this really quick as we step aside from football for just a moment. Your skin looks glowing today. What in the world are you doing?
It's Caldera Lab, man. And if you've been watching these videos the last couple of weeks, then you know Caldera Lab is the way to go. Gentlemen, we all know first impressions matter. And if you're not taking care of your skin, that's going to be the first thing someone notices and instantly either thinks you're way older than you are. Nobody says that about me because I'm using Caldera Lab. Or you just don't care about your appearance. Show them that you do and make a great first impression with Caldera Lab. Again, time's kind of running out. My pitch to all you guys has been, hey, you're going to go to these Notre Dame football games and you're going to see a bunch of people at tailgates. I was just walking through the Central Michigan tailgate scene to get to our radio show, Darin, at 11 a.m. There's a lot of people out there. You're going to see a lot of people. You want your skin to be looking good. What Caldera Lab can do with you is a 3-step regimen. They call it the clean slate, the base layer, and then the good. The clean slate starts and ends your day. It's basically a face wash. It's a cleanser, getting all that nastiness. I don't know where you guys work, but if you're on here, then you're probably not outside doing much. But maybe you've got kids. Maybe you've got a dog. You're outside. You're walking. You're running. Clean slate's going to clean all that up for you. The base layer is your daily moisturizer. If you live in South Bend, then you know it was 48 degrees for me, Darin, when I got in my car to go to the gym this morning, start my day. It's about to be a lot colder than that. Cold weather cracks the skin. You need to use that base layer. It's a daily moisturizer to hydrate your skin, jumpstart your day, give yourself some confidence. And then the good is a multifunctional serum at night that helps your skin look tighter, smoother, gets rid of those wrinkles, those fine lines. Every drop of the serum is packed with 3.4 million antioxidant units protecting your skin. Caldera Lab has proven clinical research that has found 94% of men's skin showed an overall younger looking appearance. That's what we're all going for in just a few weeks. I've been using it for a couple weeks now. And one of the things that I like the most about it, Darin, is, you know, when you go to like hotels and they've got all those different body washes and like the shower regimen is a little different than you would have at home. And it kind of like makes it a little bit more interesting because it's got different aromas and smells and stuff. I
right?
put this stuff on my skin, and like the cleanser that I was using beforehand, it's got no smell or anything. This smells like citrusy almost, or like lemony. So it kind of feels like you're doing a different routine. And again, the routine only takes 1 minute to put all that stuff on there. So go to Caldera Labs website, and if you enter the code BGI23, you will get 20% off right now. Really good offer. I know this is the third Notre Dame home game coming up against Ohio State, so if you order it now, you're not going to get it in time for that game probably, but if you want to be looking good for USC, you want to be looking good for, what is it, Pitt, Wake Forest. Am I missing one there? I think that's all the home games right there. USC, Pitt, and Wake Forest, right, Darin?
That's exactly right. You got plenty
You
of
want
time
to be looking good
to,
at those games? You got to use Caldera Lab.
absolutely. Look at Jaded Clay. Is there a product that can make me look like Hartman? The dude is stunning. Well, step one is Caldera Lab, and you got to get the good flow going too, like Sam has.
Yeah. And I've been told I have pretty decent hair, but like his, oh my goodness. Let's put him on the screen. I know everyone here is a Notre Dame fan except for the one guy that has infiltrated our chat. Maybe there's some more of them out there. You know, there's quite a few people watching, but let's just, for our YouTube watchers here, there was the man today. They actually gave him to us on a Monday, which is a little unusual. That tells you everything you need to know about how big this game is, Darin. We're talking to the starting quarterback on a Monday directly after the head coach. Marcus Freeman talked. As soon as he was done, Sam Hartman hit the podium. Not normal at Notre Dame. I think that's probably, we could still count on one hand how many times we've talked to Sam Hartman this season. So there you go. The magnitude of this one. It's palpable in every way.
Back in the day, we had Manti Te'o every single week, every Wednesday before a game, Brady Quinn. So things have changed a little bit.
I know. And I'm not here to knock on Notre Dame or anything. And at the end of the day, I think it's kind of up to Sam, and it may be Sam saying, hey, because he is a pretty humble dude. He's like, hey, I don't want to be talking about myself this entire time. So it could be up to him. But I know people like Karen here who just commented on the YouTube. She probably wants us talking to Sam all the time. More media opportunities for Sam, the more Notre Dame fans can listen to him, hear him, see him for some, obviously. The more the better. But hey, it was kind of cool to get him in like an actual press conference setting today. I liked that.
Absolutely. All right, let's go back to the questions. Hey, Horka, here on the Blue and Gold YouTube channel. He's Tyler Horka from Blue and Gold Illustrated, the Notre Dame football beat reporter. I'm Darin Pritchett from 960 AM WSBT here in South Bend. The next question is from Dell 2210. And Tyler, is there a position of greater impact in need of improvements than the offensive guards?
Yeah, I'm not gonna scroll up to find the comment because there was quite a few comments ago, but I think it was Andrew Gilmore, one of our most frequent commenters, who said it might have been a discussion we were having about underachieving position groups, and I said defensive line. So naturally, I think this is going to lend itself to this conversation, but I'll get a little bit more specific with it this time. I think it's the Vipers, and it's like Jordan Botelho starting there, obviously. Joshua Burnham is getting some run. Junior Tui Halamaka. Darin, how many times this season through 4 games have we looked up and said, this isn't an Isaiah Foskey situation where it's like, yep, there's Isaiah Foskey. How many times this season have we said, okay, yeah, there's the Vipers making a play again? I don't think it's been that many.
That was my thought. If we're not talking offensive guards, the Vipers been quiet. I mean, I don't think any of us expected Jordan Botelho to fill the shoes of Isaiah Foskey. That's a ridiculous ask, but it just doesn't seem like there's been nearly enough consistent pressure coming from him so far this year.
Yeah, let's look at the numbers here. He has 1 sack, and there's like 4 other guys that have 1 sack. I thought that he could be a 10-sack guy, or like at least an 8-sack guy, I would say. But he's not on pace for that. I mean, we're a third of the way through the season. Jordan Botelho has 1 sack. I was taught proportions in like 3rd grade, so I'm going to do a really easy one right here. If you have 1 sack in 4 games, I believe that's only average 3 sacks in a 12-game regular season. Like, if we thought that Jordan Botelho was going to be, again, like you said, Darin, not an Isaiah Foskey replacement, but the closest thing to that, because like Notre Dame wants to have something like that, even if it can't have full-blown Isaiah Foskey, it wants to have a guy that's on the roster where you look at him and you say, yeah, he might get a sack this game. Like, he's good for one. I don't think Jordan Botelho is that right now. I'm not going to say he's a bad player. He's a useful one in a lot of different areas. He's eating up a lot of snaps. The 2 guys playing with him at that Viper spot or in tandem with him are 2 sophomores. So they're still learning the ropes. And obviously they aren't those guys that you put them in and you say, yeah, they're going to get a sack. Joshua Burnham is one of those. He has 1 sack this year. Junior Tuihalamaka does not have a sack, does not have a tackle for loss. So when you look at everything together collectively at that Viper spot for me, Darin, it's it might even be ahead of the offensive guards for me as a position that's like, hey, we need to figure something out here.
Yeah, they're 1A and 1B right now from my standpoint. I mean, we've already documented how good that Ohio State front is. Those guards are going to have to bring their A-plus game on Saturday to give you a chance. So those linebackers are going to be running free in the backfield, and that is not going to be a whole lot of fun. But let's go to one of our highlighted questions, Tyler. It's from Corey. Corey, thank you so much. So what was the Obby fan on Jumbotron at the stadium Marcus Freeman mentioned in the presser today? Well, let me set this up first by saying this was apparently a student from one of the halls that had taken his shirt off and was waving it. And as they were taking shots of the crowd, the fans started to get more excited every time that he went on the Jumbotron. So they would go to somebody else, they'd boo, they'd come back to him, they'd cheer. And it went on for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes in the game. And apparently Sam Hartman knew him because when he was on the field doing that post-game interview you referred to earlier, Sam pointed out that, hey, Obby, great job, you're the best. So he knew him as well. So apparently he's a very popular student on campus.
Yeah, if you're going to get student section high priority seating or standing as they do at college football games, right there behind the recruits, right there in the front row of the student section, either A, you got to get there on time, like really early, or B, you got to know some people that are like, hey, come down here. It was probably a combination of those 2 things for this young gentleman. But yeah, as a big hockey fan, Darin, and I know you are one as well, to see someone using their shirt as like a rally towel. I'm a big rally towel guy in the playoffs at hockey games. That's always awesome. And I think the crowd caught on to that. The players caught on to that. So appreciate you, Corey Flynn, for the $4.99 super chat to bring that up because, yeah, that was kind of like in the fourth quarter there, the story. They just kept showing him. What was it, Darin? Were you still at the game at that time? It was probably like 5 times they put him on the video board.
I actually spent part of the fourth quarter for the first time in my 25 years here sitting in the stands with someone. Okay. So I actually enjoyed the game for the first time from the stands, and it was absolutely awesome. And yeah, I've been critical at times on my show that the Jumbo board doesn't do a good enough job of keeping the fans excited in down moments. That's exactly what I've been looking for. Find something to grab onto to get the fans all riled up. It can't be just like a video or a read of some time. You just need to find things in the stadium, and that was fantastic. And the fans around me were absolutely laughing, going nuts. Couldn't wait to see him on the video boards again. So I thought that was great use of the Jumbotron or video board, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, could you imagine, because there was still a pretty good amount of people at that game at that time, even in the fourth quarter. If they find him again for the Ohio State game and there's a legit, 77,622, whatever it is in there, and he's doing that, yeah, that's going to get the crowd going. And sometimes it's not just a Notre Dame thing. I think these video board operators are just like the game ops people, whoever come up with all of this stuff. They like overthink it to a degree that's like, yeah, we got to do something really creative, and this is what's going to get the crowd going. This was as simple as find the shirtless dude who's waving his towel like a maniac. Turns out he's a Notre Dame super fan, unlike most, like to a higher degree than most, and people gravitate to that. They get into it. So, yeah, something tells me we're going to see him again very soon. And by soon, I mean Saturday when that place is jumping and full of green.
He'll get preferred status seating for the Buckeye game.
You got to. Yeah, he's a legend now.
All right, Tyler, we've got one more question to get to, and this is from KCNDMIS97. And they want to know, why do you think Chris Tyree is still getting minimal snaps? He showed he has big playability, yet Davis Sherwood and Cooper Flanagan at tight end still get more snaps. Does Notre Dame need more 11 personnel versus Ohio State? And if you're not big into football lingo, 11 personnel, one running back, one tight end in the formation.
Well, I'm glad that poster eventually got to that part of the discussion, because at first you cannot compare Chris Tyree's snaps to Davis Sherwood's or Cooper Flanagan's, because Chris Tyree's a wide receiver. Those two other guys are tight ends. Notre Dame loves to play a lot of 12 personnel, one running back, two tight ends, even some 13 personnel, one running back, three tight ends. So there's that part of the conversation. Another part of the conversation is the running back room the tight end room was banged up. I mean, no Mitchell Evans in this. You still have no Eli Raridan. Kevin Bauman's been out since before the season now. So, you wiped him from the list of guys you could use there. You're going to see more Cooper Flanagan in that situation, and maybe even more Cooper Flanagan than Chris Tyree. And you're surely going to see more Davis Sherwood than Chris Tyree if those other guys are out at tight end, because there's more opportunities for tight ends to get on the field in this Notre Dame offense. So Sherwood has earned that time, though. If you saw the touchdown against NC State, he's a very good blocker out of that H-back. He's almost like a fullback most of the time. But then you get to the conversation of, okay, if Notre Dame is in 11 personnel, does Notre Dame need to see more Chris Tyree? It's possible, but here's the thing. Jaden Greathouse played 27 snaps. Chris Tyree played 14. So there's 40 snaps. I think the thing you could probably do there is even it out to like 20-20, 21-20 to get to those 41 snaps from those slot receivers. But here's the nuance in this conversation, Darin. If you're going to put Chris Tyree on the field more, that means you have to take Jaden Greathouse off the field. And Jaden Greathouse is a better blocker than Chris Tyree. He's got more touchdowns than Chris Tyree this year, I believe. Or maybe they both have two apiece at this point.
Greathouse has three.
Greathouse has three, and Tyree has two now, right? Is that? 3-2. So I guess I'll just ask you that, Darin. Is it worth taking Greathouse? I know he's a freshman, Tyree's a senior, but Greathouse is a dang good football player. Do we need less Greathouse and more Tyree? Because that's what it kind of comes down to me at this, because those two guys are pretty much exclusively playing slot receiver. One's in, one's out. Greathouse kind of doubled them up. I would be fine with an even split, 20-20. But I don't think it needs to be Tyree 27, Greathouse 14.
No, I'm with you on that. Going back to the original question about the 11 personnel, do they need to do more of that? First off, let me establish this. There have been many years since I've been covering this team. There aren't enough good players to have this conversation. Truly. I mean, depth at running back and wide receiver. Look at what we're dealing with right now. Look at the conversation we're having about all of these talented running backs and all these wide receivers with great potential. We're having a conversation about who should be on the field. It's tough because there's a lot of people deserving of playing right now. But also I think we have to remember, Tyler, what has Marcus Freeman said before last year's Ohio State game, every game since, including today? They want to run the football. Marcus Freeman wants to run the football, and one way of doing that is going with 12 personnel and using two tight ends. And unfortunately, one of those high potential, talented wide receivers has to come off the field. I just look at, you had the physical advantage over three of the first four opponents this year, and you have an opportunity to establish the run. You put those two tight ends, you're going to run over those weaker teams. Maybe this all changes against Ohio State. Maybe they go more to a spread type of offense. We'll have to see. But I think at the end of the day, I am really, really happy. And I'm not saying this about the person who asked the question, but we're getting nitpicky because we're talking about should Greathouse or Flores or Merriweather. I mean, there's a lot of good options right now. Look at the running back position. So this is a wonderful problem to have, and I hope we have this discussion all year, because that means we've got a lot of players that should be on the field. But as we know, only 6 skill position guys can be on the field at one time.
And I think, Darren, I literally used an identical line because I put out my Hey Horka written piece at blueandgold.com premium story. So you've got to sign up. And I believe we're doing a sign up special right now, half off because it's a big game week. If you go to blueandgold.com and you're not a subscriber, number one, that's a mistake. Number two, do it right now and you can get half off a year's subscription. I believe that's gone up to $109, $109.99 for 12 months of access. So knock that off. You're paying about $55 a year, 12 months of access. But what I was telling you, Darren, the way you ended your spiel just now, this is an exact quote of a line that I put in my Hey Horka online. Nice problem to have for the Notre Dame offense to get picky with wide receiver snaps for a change. I think that's where Notre Dame is at right now. And then I'll just finish my piece on all of this with, I think this could be a game where Notre Dame goes more 11 personnel. Like, I'm not saying Notre Dame's going to have a difficult time running on Ohio State, but it might be a game where Ohio State tries to sell out to stop the run, because I mentioned at the very beginning of this video all of those really talented defensive backs for Ohio State. The Buckeyes may come into this and say, okay, yeah, they got this guy Sam Hartman, but these wide receivers, I think we're going to be able to stop them with our guys. Again, Notre Dame has some good wide receivers. That's why we're on this conversation. But Ohio State's got some really good secondary players. They might go into it and say, let's go mano-a-mano, sell out to stop the run. At that point, Notre Dame counters and says, okay, yeah, your guys back there are good, but ours that we're going to send at you are pretty good too. Let's spread it out a little bit and let's hit you with 4 or 5 pass catching options on the field at the same time. That's where you might see Tyree and Greathouse on the field at the same time. There was somebody in the comments that said, why can't it's Andrew Gilmore again. Shout out to Andrew for just being so into these live shows. The wide receivers could be a little bit more interchangeable. I think Greathouse is a guy that could play, honestly, all 3 positions. I think he could play field. He could play boundary. At that point, it's, do you want to take Tobias Merriweather, who, isn't having a great season so far, but he just showed last week he's the guy that can really take the top off. I don't think there's anyone else. Chris Tyree is probably the other option that takes the top off, but he plays in the slot. So in terms of outside wide receivers that take the top off of defense, Tobias Merriweather is that. If you want Jaden Greathouse to take his spot, all of a sudden maybe you lose that deep downfield element. So they're not as interchangeable as you'd like them to be, but I think Notre Dame is still in a good spot with its wide receivers, and the Chris Tyree minimal snaps thing. 14 sounds really, really low against Central Michigan, but there might be a game where he plays like 30, honestly.
And Tyler, let's throw this into the equation. What if Ohio State's pass rush is starting to have success? You might need that extra tight end to come in and help pass protect, where maybe you send the running back out into the flat as an outlet for Sam Hartman. So 12 personnel could still be very important depending on that Ohio State pass rush. And if they really want to establish the run, if they're having trouble, you might have to go 12 personnel. But the nice thing is they have so many options right now. They can play this game a lot of different ways. If this doesn't work, they can adjust. I'll say this really quick. Based on all the wide receivers, you need guys that are really good at running intermediate routes in this game that can get that quick separation, because the windows are going to be a heck of a lot tighter in this game. And you probably want Sam to get rid of the football quick based on their pass rush. Sure, you're going to take some shots, but I think the ability of these receivers to get open in intermediate routes, you need your best out on the field in this game, because separation is going to be a whole lot tougher in this game.
Darren, I know I mentioned earlier that sometimes we come at things from different angles, and that makes for a good show. But in the article that I posted about an hour ago, maybe 2 hours ago at this point, I literally said the same thing. The Chris Tyree touchdown is nice. You're probably not going to get that against Ohio State. The Tobias Merriweather touchdown was nice. You're probably not going to get that at Ohio State. Can those guys, in addition to Jaden Thomas, maybe even Deion Colsey, Jaden Greathouse, Rico Flores, can they get open when it's 3rd and 8 and Notre Dame needs to move the sticks, or they're in jeopardy of giving the ball back to that Ohio State offense that's got all of those guys? This game, and that's why I made an honorable mention in the keys to victory for me, these wide receivers have got to get open, Darren.
Well, I arrived here in December of '98, And from about December of 98 to 2010, we didn't have these discussions. We were talking about firing the coach every other year. So the
And
fact that we're
now,
talking about which players should be playing, this is a lot more fun. And I'll tell you what, if Chris Tyree plays 4 snaps on Saturday and Notre Dame wins, no one's going to give a darn about those snaps.
no, yeah, we're nitpicking. Like we were saying, we're
Nice.
nitpicking. We're nitpicking. Chris Tyree, I guarantee you he was fine with 14 snaps because it came with a 75-yard touchdown. That is a good day at the office. And something else that probably wasn't happening in the early 2000s there. Darin, you can attest to it better than I can. Corey Flynn with another super chat. Have to shout him out. He says, ND Stadium is a tough, all caps, place to win. Cincy might be the only one we struggled since 2016. Beat Clemson twice. Georgia was close. Good luck, road team. Do you think, Darin, Notre Dame Stadium has come to be a tough place to play?
I think it's a whole lot better than when I first got here because we had arguments all the time, ushers making people sit down, that there was a generation of fans that couldn't see the game. They didn't want to stand. That's what we were dealing with many, many years ago. That's kind of gone away now. We all stand. You can cheer your team. If someone taps you on the shoulder, I mean, you say, forget about it. I'm here to cheer for my team. If you want to sit, you can sit at home and watch the game.
Yeah.
So I will say that there was a time that I didn't think Notre Dame Stadium was that tough of a place to play. Of course, the quality of Irish opponent or teams had a lot to do with that. But I think that's changed. And I just feel like, Tyler, the Irish fan base so desperately wants Notre Dame to win this game, obviously, but they want Marcus Freeman in his second year to win this massive game. The one they prayed Brian Kelly could win for so long. For him to do it now, because I think everybody loves him, his personality. I won't say who, because I wasn't okay to say this who said it, but there was a prominent Notre Dame person in the press box said after an interview, isn't it refreshing to have such a nice coach to deal with? And because then I told the story of how Brian Kelly chopped my head off after the Michigan State game, the fake field goal. I was the on-field reporter for Notre Dame Radio Network, and I got to interview Brian right after that, and he could not have been more of a you-know-what in that spot. Even though my questions were fine, he didn't want to hear it. Marcus would never do that. I just think the fans love him. They adore him. You love winning, but when you have a coach that you really appreciate, it makes it so much more fun. So I think Notre Dame fans are dying to win this game to beat Ohio State, but also to give Marcus that first big W. And with recruiting going so doggone well right now, this would be absolutely the perfect time to have that major win.
Yeah, I was going to say it's twofold, but it's probably threefold or fourfold. Or there's so many different things. You mentioned the recruiting. Absolutely. If Notre Dame wins this game, there was a point there where the Marcus Freeman love affair dipped a little bit when you lose to Marshall and you lose to Stanford. That's going to happen. But now, a year later, I feel like Notre Dame is this one win away from – and then, of course, you have to take care of business on the other side of that. Duke's a good football team, Louisville, USC. The schedule's treacherous. I was texting my buddies who are big Texas fans back home. That's where I'm from. And I'm like, all of this momentum could just like dissipate by mid-October if Notre Dame just doesn't take care of business. But on the flip side of that, really they only have to go 1-1 against Ohio State and USC and then just find ways to win those 2 games against Louisville and Duke. And this thing is still full steam ahead. I think Notre Dame is like this one win against Ohio State away from the Marcus Freeman thing being like as much as – remember how intense last offseason 2022, Darin, was when everyone was Marcus Freeman. Like I had never covered anything like that.
Yeah. And
now it's right back to that point where if he beats his alma mater, the team that he played college football for so well in that uniform, and it's a top 6 opponent, and Notre Dame has all these legit national title aspirations if they win this game. That's everything that's on the line in this game Saturday. And again, I will say it one more time, they have to take care of business against Duke and Louisville and USC on the flip side of that. But for a guy that preaches one play, one life, one game, all of this stuff, this one game matters so much to Notre Dame. I mean, if that stadium is not as electric as I've ever seen it, it is going to be, and there's going to be a lot of Ohio State fans too because they recognize the magnitude of this. But Darin, I really think Saturday is going to be a spectacle.
Yeah, and let me just add one more thing really quick. We just talked about big picture. This is huge for Notre Dame, for Marcus Freeman, what it could mean. I think it's also a game to alter the national narrative about Notre Dame football.
Yeah.
So many times in the spot, because in the playoffs, they've gotten beaten handily, even though the Alabama game, they played them, I think, better than they did the next team in the championship game.
Yeah.
But outside of beating Clemson, COVID year, which basically got Notre Dame to the playoff, there's that national perception. Notre Dame is good, but what do they do in these big spotlight moments? Well, here you go. You got a chance to erase that narrative. You beat Ohio State. You take down a top 10 team. You put this team at 5-0. And with the SEC likely only having one playoff team this year, the door is open for this football team to achieve their major goal from the start of the season. But in terms of national perception, and I talked to a Las Vegas guy this week, there's still a perception Notre Dame doesn't win these games, that Ohio State will have a lot of money put on them because it's Notre Dame. Here they are again. Chance to change that perspective, I think, from a lot of people across the country.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say before we get out of here, we've been going for over an hour. There was something in there that you mentioned, and I think it speaks to the more broad situation where we are with college football in 2023. You said there might only be one SEC playoff team. That's kind of wide open in college football this year. If there was ever a year for Notre Dame to rent Sam Hartman, one of the 5 or 10 best quarterbacks in college football, holy crap, they struck gold this year, and they are a couple big wins away. USC, like, they're 2-1 and taking care of business in every other game away from going to the college football playoff. Yes. But having a legit chance to win a national title in a way that wasn't the case in 2018 when they had to play Clemson, who was still Clemson.
Yeah.
And in 2020, when Alabama was one of the greatest college football teams we've ever seen with Devonta Smith, Mac Jones, Najee Harris was the running back. I mean, my goodness, that doesn't exist this year. Notre Dame is a win in a big game like this against Ohio State away, or USC and Clemson. Like, Notre Dame is an 11-1 season away from getting into that playoff and having a very, very good chance of actually winning a national championship. We're getting ahead of ourselves, obviously, but we're sitting here having this conversation because Notre Dame can win this game on Saturday. We're sitting here, like you said, it's a 2.5, 3-point game. They can win that game, and then all bets are on, or off, however you want to phrase that. They can do this thing this year if they just keep taking care of business.
You expect Georgia to win out.
Yeah.
You expect Florida State, if they beat Clemson, they have a very good chance of winning out based on the conference this year. Maybe Michigan, Ohio State could be an elimination game for Ohio State if they lose to Notre Dame. Michigan might be the lock from the Big Ten. So you look at Georgia, Florida State, Michigan seem to be in control of their own destiny. Well, that 4th spot, you could argue, belongs to Notre Dame right now if, and it's a big if, they take care of their business.
And the thing that you say there that should excite me if I'm a Notre Dame fan, it's a Georgia team that just did whatever the heck it did against South Carolina. Like, that was a close ball game. It's a Florida State team that just beat Boston College. Was it Boston College on Saturday?
Yeah.
By 2 points.
Game week before Clemson. I don't know if they were totally locked in.
But I just think as a college football fan, I mean, Darin, we're sitting in there on the pregame shows every Saturday, and we are literally dissecting every score. It doesn't even have to do with Notre Dame. We want to know what's going on. And I just feel like this year is more wide open than it ever has been, because the last 2 Georgia teams were like, who's beating those guys? And then the LSU team from 2019, who's beating those guys? The Alabama team from 2020, who's beating those guys? Who's beating Clemson with Trevor Lawrence? That doesn't exist this year, Darin. And here Notre Dame is with a 24-year-old quarterback who is playing the best football of his life. And a Notre Dame team that just seems like really together and moving toward a collective goal. It's exciting. And it'll get more exciting if they do win this football game on Saturday. And I think that is where we should leave this conversation, because here we are on Monday. We're 4 or 5 days away. It all comes down to that. If Notre Dame wins this football game, this season's going to really take off in a way that it already has, but like this will be full speed ahead.
When Notre Dame beats Ohio State Saturday, it's going to be tough for us and fans to move on from that game quickly. We can do that. We can delay the next thing, but for the players and coaches, man, what a tough turnaround. You beat Ohio State, you go to Duke. That's going to be tricky as can be.
And we'll be talking about it on win or loss at this same time, Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern. Hey Horka with Tyler Horka, yours truly, and Darin Pritchett. Can't wait to be talking about that one, because no matter what happens, Darin, there's going to be people that want to hear what we have to say about it. And then, like you said, look ahead to a Duke team quarterbacked by Riley Leonard, very good player, coached by Mike Elko, very good coach. Notre Dame fans know him well. So this season, man, it's a fun one to cover. If you're in our shoes, it's a good place to be, isn't it?
Well, there's no doubt. And when the Irish win Saturday, we won't be nitpicking about who played, I guarantee you.
We won't be talking about Chris Tyree snaps. We won't.
No. All right. Well, you can join Tyler with me on my radio show in South Bend at about 5:30 Eastern time tonight at WSBTradio.com. And of course, you can read all of Tyler's work at blueandgold.com. Tyler, enjoyed it as always. Thanks for letting me be a part of it. And we will talk to you next week.
Absolutely. Same time, same place. Let's do it.
All right. We'll see you all next week at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Until then, go Irish, beat Buckeyes.